I don't know if we can use any of that for our cold open.
Welcome into another D3 tournament week on the D3 Datacast. Last week was sweet, but this next week is elite.
Zach, we've been having so much fun with the tournament. I feel like even though we got only one round this last weekend with the split days, I feel like we still got plenty of basketball and an opportunity to kind of focus on each game as it was happening. So I really liked how this played out, even though we only had one round instead of two this past weekend.
Yeah, it was fun, and it's nice because you do get to enjoy those games a little bit more, just in terms of them being spread out and be able to kind of focus on them. But also, in a normal weekend, when you have a Friday game and a Saturday game, you have teams playing two games. Those wins can be very fleeting, right? You get that Friday win, and you have to turn around. You get a Saturday loss. It's not like that Friday game didn't happen, but it feels like you always have to get that second win to get into the next week, to have that week to really enjoy it. And I feel like it's those teams that move on between weeks that we really remember those kinds of tournament wins, right? So just having a little bit extra space to breathe, I think, gives us more space to appreciate some of these teams that are advancing through the tournament.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Okay, so let's move into it. Let's talk about that standalone Sweet 16 weekend that we are coming off of. Let's start
Yeah.
with the four games Friday. And of course, with the nature of Yeshiva's scheduling requirements, that gives a little bit of extra space between games and extra focus, as this Yeshiva Emory game down in Atlanta was a 1 p.m. start. It was the only game going on. There were no overlapping games, as all the other games were later in the evening.
Yeah, Zach, it was an Ethan Faust 3 that gave Emory a 19-4 early in the game on this one. And it looked like for a moment the host Eagles were going to just run away from Yeshiva. But credit to the Max, they didn't fold, and they spent the remainder of the first half chipping away at the Emory lead. And the two teams entered the locker room with Emory holding a 7-point advantage. That was 51-44. But the second half began with another quick Emory burst to extend the lead back to 15 once again. And Yeshiva had to play from behind, facing another double-digit deficit. But it was a Zevi Samet layup that pulled the Max within 4 points with 13:08 left to play. But unfortunately for Yeshiva, they would get no closer as Emory was able to pull away big time and close out the 101-80 victory. For Yeshiva, it really was the Zevi Samet show, as it so often is. He scored 43 points, including some of those ridiculous three-pointers that we've become so accustomed to. Yoav Oselka also was a major contributor with 20 efficient points. But Yeshiva didn't get any scoring from their bench, and the rest of the starters only combined for 17 points. Made it really difficult to catch up to Emory that way. Emory also did lead on their starting five, but the stat sheet was much more balanced for the Eagles. Ben Pierce was his usual terrific self. He recorded a double-double on 26 points and 10 assists, but he didn't have the only double-double stat line for Emory. Ethan Faust had 19 points and 10 rebounds. Mario Awasam, who I thought was particularly outstanding in this game for Emory, had 17 points and 12 rebounds. AJ Harris and Jair Knight also each scored in the double figures, as every member of the Emory starting five did. They had 19 points and 15 points respectively. Really impressive win here for Emory over Yeshiva to open things up on Friday.
It was an impressive win, and it's a final score line that probably doesn't do justice to how well Yeshiva played for much of the game. You talked about the 19-4 start to the game. The start of the second half was not quite as bad, but really I thought part of the story of the game was the start of both halves not really being what Yeshiva needed to compete in this game. Kind of what happened in the middle parts of each half, and really the rest of the first half. The end of the second half kind of is where things got away from Yeshiva and stretched. But it was a really good game, very much result in doubt. And as I tweeted from our show account, within that, there were certainly times where you could see that on a different day when maybe Emory was not quite as good, where maybe Yeshiva was able to get some more of that kind of secondary or tertiary offensive contributions. You could see how that upset could have happened. But in the end, I think you really see why Emory was the favorite and Yeshiva was the underdog. And things really needed to line up well for Yeshiva to pull off an upset.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to a game played at Crenshaw Gymnasium at Randolph-Macon, Matt. That was Christopher Newport getting a 59-57 win over the host and newly minted D3 Datacast #1 team in the efficiency ratings. But that didn't matter to the captains, who got off to a great start. It was a slow start on the other side for Randolph-Macon, making it a 16-4 game about 6 minutes in. And really, from the jump had Randolph-Macon playing from behind, which is what I think is what they don't want to do. I think they're particularly tough when they are ahead and you are having to come back on them, not the other way around. It was a 16-4 start. But CNU mostly was able to maintain that lead through the first half. They took a 35-21 lead into the break. Just six first half field goals for Randolph-Macon. 35 is maybe more than what they're used to giving up in a half, but I think offensively is really where they were having the biggest problems. Randolph-Macon was able to kind of turn things around in the second half. They went from going 6 of 25 in the first half to 14 of 25 in the second half, and they actually took a 40-39 lead with 12:31 remaining. Kind of a tight back and forth game from there. But it was the Christopher Newport captains making just enough baskets down the stretch. Isaiah Dozier and Ethan Ward with buckets that proved to be enough in pulling out the victory. And they were both in the lane, which is where Christopher Newport really hurt Randolph-Macon. 42 of their 59 points on the night were in the lane. And that was especially important because just the way this game went, there was only one 3-point shot made on the entire night. CNU was 0 for 8. Randolph-Macon 1 of 13 from beyond the arc. So the D3 Datacast efficiency ratings #1 team is knocked out. Christopher Newport advancing again to Fort Wayne, a team that we have seen in our travels to Fort Wayne in the past, and we will get to see them again.
Yeah, I was thinking down the stretch of this game as I was watching it close out, whoever comes up on the short end of this one is going to be kicking themselves that they just couldn't have made one more 3-pointer. Because like that was going to be the margin, and it was. Randolph-Macon was the team that made one, but they still lost by 2. Christopher Newport just made things difficult for them. And credit for the captains. Our computer liked Randolph-Macon by a lot in this game, and I think we commented during our picks section that the line seemed too big, but it seemed too big. Like we thought it would be single digits, but Christopher Newport flipped that all the way around, won the game. Looked like a great team. I think they play a tough schedule. They don't really have the coast to coast schedule to lean on, so they have to play a lot of difficult games. They play these ODAC type teams. So they're familiar with Christopher Newport, with Randolph-Macon type teams, and what they come up with for their schedule throughout the season, I think prepares them for games like this. It feels like they had some ups and downs, but they're playing really well right now, or they were in this game. They looked great. Our computer did not give them. I think they were maybe the biggest underdog in this round, but for them to come out and get the win on the road was very, very impressive for Christopher Newport. Excited to see them once again in Fort Wayne. All right, Zach, the next game of the night was Illinois Wesleyan and Endicott. Illinois Wesleyan got to host this game due to Endicott apparently not submitting to host. So I think that played a pretty big factor here. It was a pretty slow start offensively for both teams, particularly slow for Endicott, who didn't make their second field goal until more than 9 minutes had come off the clock. Fortunately, though, for the Gulls, Illinois Wesleyan hadn't really been able to pull away. So the Matt Bone tip-in made it a 12-7 ball game. Illinois Wesleyan was able to keep Endicott at arm's reach for most of the remainder of the game. The Titans were able to stretch a 12-point lead to as many as 14 early in the second half, but Endicott stayed close enough to make things interesting and make Illinois Wesleyan fans sweat it out. Endicott was able to use a quick 5-point burst to cut the Illinois Wesleyan lead to 66-61 with 6 minutes to play, but a Noah Cleveland dunk and one helped Illinois Wesleyan stretch it back to 12 over the next couple of minutes, but Endicott would rally once again and cut the lead to 4 on a Marcus Montanillo layup with 27 seconds to play. A missed Illinois Wesleyan free throw would give Endicott the chance to cut it to a single possession in the final 10 seconds, but a flurry of offensive rebounds, tip-in attempts, and putback chances were unsuccessful, and Mason Funk was able to rebound the ball for Illinois Wesleyan and make a pair of free throws to ice the victory and secure the 83-77 win. It feels like it's not very often when teams like Endicott have to fly from the West Coast to, west to the Midwest or even further in the tournament, but we got one here, and it led to a pretty fun matchup. One where Endicott did acquit themselves pretty well. Matt Bowen paced the Gulls with 25 points. Marcus Montanino had 22. Elijah Kinney had 12. For Illinois Wesleyan, Noah Cleveland and Carlo Kolak each recorded a double-double. That was 25 points and 10 rebounds for Cleveland, who is still playing on that cast on his arm to protect a broken wrist. And it was 24 points and 11 rebounds for the senior Kolak. Mason Funk and Kason Lawrence each chipped in 11 points as well.
Yeah, Kolak was huge. I believe a career high for him. Okay. Another big tournament performance. He was the hero a year ago in the second round.
Yeah.
And yeah, Noah Cleveland very much looking like Noah Cleveland in his return. If he is limited, it doesn't really look like it. He's certainly having an impact on that one. Matt, a really fun ending though. Really got hairy as Endicott was making a you know a last ditch effort, bringing the pressure. Had some opportunities, some missed opportunities. There's some looks and attempts kind of near the rim area that they probably wish they had back. Also a technical foul, that kind of gave
Right.
Illinois
Yeah.
Wesleyan a couple of points. I don't know how much talk there has been about whether or not that's necessarily was a controversial technical foul call there, but it's one that happened. You got to point out in a game that played out the way it did, as close as it did, that those were 2 points that uh, you know maybe you just kind of control the emotions in a different way that kind of changes the situation just a little bit. But yeah, Illinois Wesleyan looking great and going to be a tough out for anyone. We'll see how long this run continues for them. And then rounding out Friday was St. Thomas, Texas, getting a 65-63 win over WashU in a rematch from a non-conference game in the regular season. That was, I believe, a 1-point win for WashU in St. Louis earlier in the season. WashU was able to keep St. Thomas from extending their lead, too far out in front, pulled to within 3 after trailing by 7 in the first half. But Brendan Webb hit a 3 on the Celts' final possession of the first half to send them into the break up 6. And that kind of seemed big to me, Matt, because it kind of set the starting point for what happened there in the second half, where St. Thomas was able to extend their lead. It reached 12 on a few occasions, and Wash U cut it down from there, but St. Thomas was able to bounce back to kind of run it back out. And that's where the lead was at 12 with just over a minute and a half to play. It was 64-52. However, a furious rally, including a big 3 by Connor May, made it 65-62 with 9 seconds to play, but just not enough time for the Bears, despite St. Thomas missing a free throw, a front end there. So St. Thomas still had 2 fouls to give. That was able to, drain a few precious seconds remaining. And then they chose to play it correctly, as Bill Fenlon would argue, and put them at the line instead of giving WashU a chance at a game-tying 3-point shot there. But a defensive rebound after WashU had to miss the second free throw to try to get an offensive rebound and put back, sealed the win to send St. Thomas to Fort Wayne and avenge that regular season loss they had at WashU back in November, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I had this game on. I was impressed with St. Thomas, and I will admit though, with that 12-point lead, with whatever it was, just over a minute to play,
Yeah.
I did let my attention wander, and I got on to having a discussion about something else. And then I turned to see that the game ended up as a 2-point margin, and I had to kind of go back and check to see what exactly I missed, because WashU did kind of rally there late. Don't know if they ever really threatened to immediately take the lead over or anything like that, but they didn't give up. It's always impressive when a team, and we saw this with Endicott and Illinois Wesleyan as well, right? A team is down maybe double digits with the last minute or two and still stages a comeback to make the other team play it out. And I think that was interesting to see here. Credit to St. Thomas, a team I'm very excited to see in person for the first time, I think, coming up in Fort Wayne here.
So interesting dynamic at that point, end of Friday. We knew half of the field that we would see in Fort Wayne, but had to wait till the next day to see what the other half of that group that would advance to the Elite Eight would be.
Yeah, Zach, the first game here was Trinity and Hood. Trinity got the 88-71 win, but Hood had been one of the best offensive teams by our D3 Datacast computer efficiency ratings all season long, but Trinity was able to hold them to just 2 points over the first 5 minutes as Trinity built themselves an early double-digit lead. The Blazers were able to cut that lead to as few as 7 late in the first half, but layups by Jarrell Okarago and Jared Berry at the end of that half gave Trinity an 11-point lead at the break. The Bantams never let that lead dip below 10 points in the second half as they ultimately cruised to secure the 88-71 win. They punched their ticket back to Fort Wayne for the 3rd season in a row. For Hood, Javon Yarborough capped off his outstanding season with 28 points, 7 rebounds, and 6 assists, really stuffing the stat line there. Garrett Cox scored 16 for them as well. Trinity was led in scoring by Jarrell Okarago with 24 points. Henry Vetter, he had 20. Drew Lazar scored 14, and Jared Berry put 14 off the bench. Zach, as Trinity prepares to come back to Fort Wayne once again, I'm just reminded and floored that we're seeing a lot of the same names now that we've seen for
Yeah.
kind of 2 and 3 seasons in Fort Wayne. So no surprise that they've been a great team. We saw them in the Final Four fall to Trine 2 years ago. We saw them win the national championship, and now in the Elite Eight taking place at Fort Wayne, we see them here once again. The core of this team is intact, and they're going to get another shot at it.
That was going to be my exact initial reaction as just you were going through the leading scores there. Some very familiar names that we've seen play a lot of really important basketball over the last 3 years now. And we heard from that group last year in Fort Wayne how that initial trip to Fort Wayne when they lost in the semifinals, how important that was just for learning the experience, and that gave them a sense of confidence and familiarity coming back last year. So this is going to be a group with an expanded field, coming to Fort Wayne, many of them for the first time. I think that's going to give them a real advantage. And at this point, this is a group not looking to take the next step, but really to cap fine careers with another championship. So that was one NESCAC team moving on to Fort Wayne, and we were guaranteed a second one because Tufts and Wesleyan matched up in another Sweet 16 game, and it was Tufts with a 75-61 win. But the big story there, Matt, was what Tufts was able to do in the first half, really at both ends of the court, doubling up on Wesleyan 44-22 at the half. Particularly good on the day was freshman Ricardo Nieves, who made his first start of the tournament, finished with a game-high 21 points on 7 of 11 shooting, 6 rebounds, had a couple steals, and he's now been the Jumbo's leading scorer in 2 of their 3 tournament wins. It was a big halftime deficit, but Wesleyan did have the lead down to just 4 with under 9 minutes to play, but a dunk and a 3 by Tufts had it back to 9, and Wesleyan wasn't able to get it, back down to within a couple possessions after that. Also big for Tufts, they were out without Scott Gemesi for the opening weekend. He was able to return, but he came off the bench, played 18 minutes, scoring 9. So that's going to be a big thing. They've been able to advance through those first 2 rounds without him. Now getting him back, that could be a really big boost, getting him back into the lineup as they move on to Fort Wayne. And, him being gone, kind of setting up an opportunity for some other guys to step up, Nieves and some others, and they've been able to do that. So Tufts playing really well. And, I think definitely with the, as the tournament progresses, moving into Fort Wayne, this is a real kind of arrow pointing up type team.
Yeah. And Gemesi is one of the best players in Region 1, one of the best players in all of Division 3. And so if Tufts can have him at full strength or near full strength, in and around like the Elite 8 where everyone is great, if they can be back up to or close to full strength, I think that's going to be really, really big for Tufts. All right, Zach, our third game of Saturday was Chicago and Gustavus Adolphus. This was what ended up being just a 1-point win, 93-92 for Chicago. But it was Gustavus Adolphus who put Chicago on the back foot early as the Gusties ran out to a 27-13 lead in the first 11 minutes of the game. Gustavus Adolphus was able to hold that margin for the next several minutes, but a 19-6 run to close off the half brought Chicago within a single point at the break. Chicago then scored the first 5 points out of the locker room to grab their first lead of the game, but it was a fight the rest of the way. The Maroons did build their lead into a double-digit lead midway through the second period, but Gustavus didn't surrender, clipped it all the way down to 2 points with 2 minutes left. Chicago would really only score 2 free throws in the final minute 45 of that game, but Gustavus Adolphus couldn't get their last second attempt to go, and it was Chicago who won 93-92 to advance to the Elite 8. Chicago had 5 players score in double figures, with Shane Regan leading the team with 21 points. Eamon Kenna scored 18 points, with 4 of them being 3-pointers, or 4 shots being 3-pointers. Daniel Cochran also had 18 points. Nick Roper had 16, and Philip Lawrence had 11 off the bench. For Gustavus Adolphus, Miles Barnett led all scorers in this game with an impressive 40 points. Andrew Quam had 14, and Ibina Izora had 13 points off the bench.
So there's been a few games now where we've noted one team getting off to a really good start, getting a big lead kind of off the jump. This is the one, though, where that team ultimately was not able to pull off the win. Some happened in some other games where certainly a game was made of it, but that team that did have the big lead did ultimately win. Different story here with Chicago down big early and able to pull out really what was a terrific game. I think the final score maybe is not surprising. The surprising thing was more the 27-13 lead that Gustavus was able to get off of. But in the end, a real treat of a Sweet 16 game there between those two.
And the line score in this one, 40-39 in the first half, 52-54 in the second half. That even doesn't show that the game had swings either way on both halves there. So even more of an intriguing game than the close line score even suggests there.
And then our final team to move into the Elite Eight was Mary Washington with a 73-68 win over UW La Crosse. La Crosse led early by as many as 5. Mary Washington led by as many as 9. The latest of those 9-point leads came to open the scoring in the second half with a Caden Bates 3. But then everything, was played inside that tight range from there. The game had a total of 5 ties, 8 lead changes, right? So there was no huge lead and comeback attempts in this one. But the back and forth ended with a Kai Robinson 3 with just under 5 minutes to play. That gave Mary Washington a 63-62 lead. But there was no cruising to victory from there. It's just the last time the lead changed. A split at the line left La Crosse down 1 with 20 seconds to play. But that would be the final point they would score, as a couple missed shots combined with some MUW free throws gave, not MUW, UMW.
Yes, different team.
Some free throws gave us the 73-68 final score there. Kai Robinson, Matt, was fantastic as usual. He played all 40 minutes, 35 points, 11 rebounds, 4 assists, and a steal as the only Mary Washington Eagle in double figures. Sam Grieger had 23 for La Crosse. Dustin DeRusso had 20 for La Crosse. They also played all 40 minutes, right? So just some of the top players in Division III going after it in a Sweet 16. That's what you love to see, a hotly contested game pulled out by Mary Washington, 73-68.
Yeah, and for UW La Crosse, what a great run these last 2 years have been. Unfortunately for them, no trips to the Final Four or to Fort Wayne, the Elite Eight round this year, but they've been right there both years. They have had a fantastic run. For Mary Washington, though, this is kind of capping off the season that we kind of thought we might get after the Sweet 16 run preview last year with such that young team, still a pretty young team, a lot of young guys, and then them making this terrific run, really becoming the team that we saw the second half and into the tournament last year. We saw them play at the Great Lakes Invitational in November. I'd actually messaged one of our friends during a Mary Washington game that Kai Robinson was looking very All-American-y, and he's just continued that production all season long. Had a great game here today. Excited to see this team once again now in March here in Fort Wayne.
So let's move into what we're going to see in Fort Wayne with our Elite Eight preview, as we've done, kind of using the D3 Datacast efficiency ratings to dive into these matchups a little bit more, kind of see where these teams rank offensively, defensively, and by the computer overall, and then use that to really put some numbers to, like, who are the favorites, who might be the underdogs, and by how much. So let's start with that NESCAC matchup we'll get here is the computer's number 1 team in Trinity, Connecticut against the number 3 team Tufts. But we talked in the lead up to this point in the tournament, earlier in the tournament, how in the computer ratings, Trinity, Connecticut and Randolph-Macon were really separated themselves ahead of the field. And so even though this is a 1 versus 3 matchup according to the efficiency ratings, there's still a computer line of 7.5 points on it here with kind of a 75-25 split in terms of win probabilities. Again, that's just because of how good the computer sees Trinity compared to the rest of the country at this point, with Randolph-Macon knocked out.
Yeah, and Trinity did take over that number 1 rating with Randolph-Macon losing. They kind of got back that number 1 spot. This is the number 1 and number 3 teams in that quadrant, but it's the number 1 and number 4 teams in the country. Maybe a small difference there, but it's still at this round though. One of the things, even just to zoom out slightly, all 8 teams are within our computer's top 20, and all of these teams rank in the top 10 in either their offensive or defensive numbers. So you have to be elite in something to get to the Elite Eight round, at least this year, and this is what they are. But that Tufts and Trinity game really interesting because both of these teams are top 10, top 9 even, by both offense and defense. So obviously two of the 4 best teams in the country by our computer. And as you mentioned, still shocking that it's a 75% win probability for Trinity and a 7.5 point computer line. Especially if we can get a healthy Jamesi. I'm assuming he's on his way back and not on his way out, if he was able to play, or whatever it was, 18 minutes or so off the bench. Hopefully he will continue to get healthy. I think that will tighten things up and give Tufts maybe not an advantage, but maybe more of an even game here. So definitely really exciting to see. And two teams that play with more of a deliberate tempos, right? 70, 71 possessions per game. A thing that you'll see for most of the teams here in the Elite Eight round is maybe more of a deliberate pace. Some of that is by the elite defense, so it makes it hard for other teams to score and score quickly. But also on offense, just kind of maybe probing defenses until you get what you want and not settle for a bad shot.
And then the computer's actual number 3 team, Mary Washington, Matt, will take on the computer's number 6 team in Chicago. Both of these teams offensively elite. You talked about those top 10 ratings at one place or another. Mary Washington is in the top 10 in both in terms of their adjusted offensive efficiency and adjusted defensive efficiency, where they rank 6th offensively and 10th defensively. Chicago, the computer's number 2 offense overall. But outside the top 50 in terms of their adjusted defensive rating, but still the number 6 team overall, the computer does like Mary Washington, 58% win probability compared to 42% win probability. But kind of a one possession type game, 2.5 point computer line. I think this is exactly kind of what you expect going into an Elite Eight. Two great teams that, maybe you can call one a slight favorite, but, really a pretty close to a toss-up type game where one possession, one way or another, you wouldn't necessarily be surprised.
Yeah, and it's interesting here. Number 3 versus number 6 would be a perfectly seeded Elite Eight matchup by our computer efficiency rating. So that's interesting to see. Also, like a one possession type computer line. It's not exactly a 50-50 game, but it's almost as close to a 50-50 game as you can get while still having some separation between the two teams. One of the matchups I'm most excited to see, I think both these two teams are interesting. Two teams we've followed all season long. They've been kind of in that top 5 or 10 range all season long. Both of these teams are, both in my ballot and in the national top 25 poll. So really, really fascinating here. And a Chicago, Illinois team versus a Virginia team. Just, I think what it's all about when you come to the national tournament, especially at single site, neutral site games like Fort Wayne, Indiana. Just really, really great one to see here.
Another one of those type of matchups, Matt, Emory against Illinois Wesleyan, right? We got Central Illinois up against the team from Atlanta. Emory is the number 5 team in overall efficiency margin. Illinois Wesleyan, number 20. But playing as well as anyone. Emory, the number 8 team offensively, according to the computer, 14 defensively. Illinois Wesleyan, one of those elite defensive numbers in the top 5. And then an adjusted offensive ranking of 123. We've seen at times Illinois Wesleyan, if they're hitting shots, they're going to be tough to beat. They're as good as anyone, but maybe just not quite as consistent on the whole this year as some of those other top 100 type offenses. But they've certainly kind of the second half of the season particularly had it going. So a team kind of trending in the right direction, maybe outplaying kind of that season total view that the computer would take there. But even though it's like a 5 versus 20 matchup, according to the computer, it's still, a 2/3, 1/3 split in terms of the computer's win probabilities, just a 5-point line, kind of a 2 possession type game right there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, all teams have to deal with injuries to some degree, right? But Illinois Wesleyan has had to deal with injuries to maybe 2 of their best players this season. They lost Josh Fridman back in the non-conference season, and that was kind of the start of maybe a 3 or 4 game stretch where they didn't quite look themselves, and maybe adjusting to not having your point guard was part of that. I wonder what their computer rating would look like if they had a healthy team all season long, and they didn't have to go through a stretch like that. Even though the way our system works is games that happen, back in November or December are not quite as impactful anymore as games that were played in January and February, but still those are weighing in on their system. And then down the stretch in the CCIW, they had to learn to play without Noah Cleveland when he broke his wrist, and I think go through at least the conference tournament without him. He's been able to come back and play the last couple of weekends with that soft cast on his wrist, but they had some games without him. And again, if they had him, maybe the computer lines would be a little bit more favorable for them. But still, look, like nationally elite defense, number 5 overall. Their offense isn't quite where some of the other teams are, but they're very similar to maybe a team in the next pod in St. Thomas as far as most of those ratings. But Illinois Wesleyan makes it difficult to score on you. I think it's a really, really interesting matchup. I think Illinois Wesleyan's strength offensively is in Noah Cleveland, or he's one of their strengths. I don't know that Emory has a great matchup for them, but then Emory's strength in a lot of ways is their guards, right? In particular, Ben Pierce and Jair Knight. And does Illinois Wesleyan have they have good defenders, but they have guys that can play with the level of Pierce and Knight? That'll be just really interesting to see. It seems like both teams' strength will be what they want to take directly at the other team. So it'll be fascinating to see how that plays out on the court.
Another thing matchup-wise to talk about, the tempo number here for Emory stands out compared to the rest of the group here, where you've got Emory, who plays at a top 50 pace compared to the rest of this group. For the most part, kind of like more in that like 300 range or outside the top 200, maybe like the bottom half in terms of pace. So it'll be interesting because, from that standpoint, Emory is stylistically different from so many of these other teams. So not only that Illinois Wesleyan matchup, but should Emory win and play a semifinal matchup against someone, that's going to be kind of the same kind of distinction going up against their next opponent, because they're going to be looking to play faster than anyone else here in this Elite Eight field.
Well, and if you can play in transition, that doesn't allow the other defense to set up and play their defense. So that's going to work to Emory's advantage if they can keep that tempo up.
All right, one more matchup to talk about here with St. Thomas, number 12 team, according to the computer. Kind of a similar shape in how they get to that rating, as we talked about with Illinois Wesleyan, where the offensive number is just outside the top 100, but it's an elite defensive number, in this case, ranking number 4. Christopher Newport, a similar shape as well, right? Just inside the top 100 offensively, and a defense that ranks number 6 according to the computer. So it's a 12 versus 18 matchup overall. Just a 1-point game here according to the computer line. This makes it as even of a matchup as we're going to see, at least in terms of kind of the median expectation, right, that the computer line is after. 53% win probability for St. Thomas, 47% for Christopher Newport. Big change from last weekend when Christopher Newport went to Randolph-Macon, one of the computer darlings, and faced one of the biggest computer lines against them. They get the win there, move into what looks like a really compelling even matchup with St. Thomas.
Yeah, basically a 50-50 game now. And we heard on social media that they were aware that our computers gave them a 7% chance to beat Randolph-Macon. And hey, they took advantage of that 7% and they won. Now getting what looks like an even game. And Zach, you're correct to talk out that the offensive and defensive ratings for these two teams both seem very, very similar. I think to St. Thomas's credit and benefit, I think this year they really stepped up their non-conference schedule compared to what they had maybe done in previous seasons. So I think they're prepared for this. We know Christopher Newport's a team that needs to go out and get those games because they don't play a conference schedule. So they've played your Randolph-Macons and your other ODAC teams around the region. So they're used to playing other good teams with tough defenses. So I think that's going to help out Christopher Newport. A really compelling matchup, a team that we have seen in Fort Wayne in the last several years, but versus a team making their first trip there in St. Thomas. So a really, really fun matchup, really good one, and I'm excited to see it come out to be almost a 50-50 split because I think it's going to be anyone's ball game.
All right, let's zoom out for some overall bracket odds. We don't have to zoom out quite as far as we did before, Matt, because there's not much of the bracket left. So we talked about those win probabilities going into Fort Wayne, but just as we kind of look at the bracket odds going beyond that, Trinity, Connecticut remains a favorite to get through that semifinal round. Although, as we talked about with the red number there, Matt, that's a number that continues to fall from where that number was entering the tournament. We talked about the impact of the path on that number, right? And just with all of these top teams, and you see those efficiency ranks kind of all around Trinity, where they'll take on the number 4 team, and then either the number 3 team or the number 6 team, right? There is not any letting up of the path that Trinity, Connecticut will have to get through in order to win a back-to-back championship.
Yeah, and now we've gone through the rounds where they've been big favorites. Even though they were tested in some of those games, they were still big favorites. So they had really high odds to get to these rounds in the first place, and they have achieved that. For most teams, that means that you see your odds continue to balloon, right? They continue to increase. Everyone else, their odds have gotten better from here on out. It's just that one round, that chance to win the Final Four round, that took a little bit of a dent from last week for Trinity. But as you said, right? The number 4 team by our computers this next week, and then either the 3 or the 6 in the game after. So they have a really difficult path in front of them, or at least as our computer sees. But look, you're right. You're in the Elite 8 round. You expect every game from here on out to be difficult. We have 8 of the best 10 or 20 teams. But I think that's another fascinating thing to me is we've talked for months about how that there were probably 35 teams that we could see get to the Elite 8 or maybe Final Four rounds, if not win at all. And here we see not too many surprises of teams that are here or are not here, right? 8 teams, they're all ranking within the top 20 by our computer. And that's part of what we meant when we said anyone could get here. But it is kind of a surprising thing that we didn't see a larger underdog get here. And they all were teams that were either kind of number 1s or number 2 or number 3 seeds in their quadrant. So there wasn't really like a big upset like we've seen. Like when Trine came through to win the national championship, right? They were a little bit of a lower seed than these teams are right now. And that was to win the national championship. So I think that was maybe not something that we're necessarily seeing this year, unless we get by the computer, right? Maybe if we get Illinois Wesleyan through to the championship game, maybe that would be more similar to that season.
Well, and I wanted to bring up that Trine team, right? And you talk about Illinois Wesleyan here shows up as the lowest odds to win the championship. It's at 3%. Well, those Trine guys were at the podium taking the trophy, chanting 4% because taking this view that was heading into Final Four weekend, right? So Illinois Wesleyan showing up here with a 3%, yet still having an extra round to get through before we got to the point that 4% number went up for Trine. That just adds to adds a level of uncertainty, and yet they still have that number that looks very similar to that 4% number that Trine had going into that weekend. And Trine was great that weekend. How they played that weekend were certainly a deserving national champion, right? So I there's some low numbers. It kind of looks like a Trinity, Connecticut versus the Field situation here. Some of those numbers are not looking super great, but would any of these teams winning a national championship surprise us at this point? I don't think so.
No, yeah. And to get to the championship game, every team has 11% or greater odds to get there. You look at like Mary Washington and Emory, they're basically exactly 1/8 odds. The Field are slight favorites over Trinity. We haven't really seen Trinity gain that much, a surprisingly little amount of total championship odds to get here. It's been more of the Field kind of evening things up. We've talked about that difficult path they potentially have left, but I think we have a lot of realistic probabilities, right? There's no, Tufts is the biggest underdog, it looks like, in this next round, but that's basically like the odds of getting 2 heads in a row, which is not that unreasonable, right? You could flip a coin and get 2 heads in a row. That's basically the odds of Tufts advancing. And then once you get to the chance of winning that Final Four game on Saturday night, everyone's got that 11% or better. So people are still having double-digit odds of advancing. There are big favorites in each in each half of the bracket, right? Trinity and Emory looking like pretty big favorites over their respective quartets, but nothing's unreasonable. Nothing is astronomical odds, especially if you talk about teams, whoever advances to that Final Four. I think you're going to see those odds increase, obviously, and get better. Really anyone's ball game. I think it's really wide open. 8 teams come into Fort Wayne. I was going to say infinite, though there is a finite number of combinations of what could happen, but I wouldn't really be surprised at any combination that could happen.
No, it's going to be fun to see what happens, right? What is probably going to happen or most likely to happen. It doesn't matter. We're going to get some great games, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it. And that's what's fun about the tournament, is seeing what actually does play out, right? I think for fans who listen to the D3 Football Around the Nation podcast, Greg Thomas has a saying. He likes to say the playoff or the tournament, however you want to say it, is undefeated, right? We can call favorites and underdogs, right? But at the end of the day, they play it out. We get great games. There are some great wins. There are tough losses, and at the end, maybe it's a favorite, maybe it was not necessarily a favorite, but we get a deserving champion either way. All right. That's kind of the preview. Should we get into some picks?
Yep, let's get into picks. We've been having fun with guest pickers. So when we come back, we'll be with a couple of extra guests who are going to share their perspective on Division III basketball and pick the games with us.
All right. We've been having a ton of fun bringing on some special guests for our pick segment. We've got not one, but two this week. We've got KJ Allison and Neruda Perdomo of the Not Even D2 podcast. Thanks for jumping in, guys. It's been a lot of fun listening to you, and glad you could take a few minutes to join us here for this week's picks as we're getting down to like major crunch time in the D3 tournament.
Yeah, it's been a wonderful tournament. We'll definitely talk about that. Appreciate you guys having us on. I think you guys know I've been listening for a while now. I'll try to catch every episode, and you guys put out good content. So it's definitely love from our end, and appreciate you having us on.
I can only say the same thing to KJ. This reminds me of when we did the preseason stuff last year.
Yeah.
I had a great time talking to you guys, and now we're doing it again for the Elite Eight. It's gonna be fun.
That was fun. KJ, I got to ask because you kicked off the Not Even D2 podcast as a solo effort, and from the time I saw it pop up, I love the name. It brought a smile to my face. I think people who follow Division III basketball kind of understand the nod there. But I just wanted to ask you a little bit about choosing Not Even D2 as the podcast name, and maybe some of the early reactions you got to it as your name started getting around.
Yeah, appreciate that. I'd like to take credit, but I feel like I was brainstorming a ton of ideas and nothing was sticking. I would ask some of my creative friends, like, you have any ideas? And they would give me some things and it wasn't hitting. My dad just texted me one day and he was like, Not Even D2. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, that would be a fire podcast name. So I was like, that actually is fire, Dad. Like, my dad's not really that creative, but he got it. And then now it's stuck with us. I think Sam Peak, like we had him on a while ago when it was first starting. Ruda was a part of the pod at the time, and he was like, I had to join once I seen the Not Even D2. Like, that was a cool name. So I think that, like you said, people that understand the nod, they just really like gravitate to the name. So shout out to my dad for sure.
Yeah, recently you've had a couple of really good episodes with featuring teams and players that have run deep into this national tournament. I think your most recent one was with a couple of guys from Endicott who we just saw in the Sweet 16. You also had Shane Regan from University of Chicago. So you guys have been breaking it down, some of these really, really great programs. So how has it been kind of getting in contact with some of those guys and learning about their stories and about their journeys in the tournament here?
Ruda, you want to start?
No, for sure. Definitely been a cool thing just to get to know these guys on a different level. Obviously, you watch them play and you can admire their skill or their teams. But I knew Marcus Montanino before and Elijah Kinney just because they're from the same area as me, kind of in New Hampshire and Boston, and work out together in the summer. So I knew their story, but really it's been cool just to share their stories, right? Like, Marcus is a walk-on coming to Division III basketball. Elijah, he's a highly touted player, coming into college basketball. So it's been great to get to know them and kind of share their stories to the masses.
Yeah, I'll just add something real quick. Like, it's cool getting to know them, but also to see that you have kind of like a tie in a lot of these games and into all these games. So we'll watch a game like, oh, we had this coach on, or we had this player on. Not even just D3, like at all levels. Or I was at a sports conference the other day and the Big East commissioner walked in. I was like, hey, KJ. So it's cool just building rapport with, people of all different statures and people doing big things. Some things I wish that I was better at basketball to be able to do, but it didn't go that way. And just being able to stick around the game has been cool for sure.
So you guys both bring a really cool perspective to the podcast. You're both former Division III hoopers. This is your first year kind of outside of that, like with playing careers ending last year. Kind of, what's this first year outside of being a player, an active player, been like? What's that meant for maybe giving you a little bit more of an opportunity to follow what's going around nationally, and how's that kind of impacted what you're doing with the podcast? Certainly you've got other things you're busy with, but it's a little bit different, preparing for a single opponent versus kind of just being able to sit back and observe what's going on around Division III basketball as a whole.
Yeah, for me, it was definitely an adjustment. Just like when Ruda and I both were playing, it was all right. You have class all day, then you try to get maybe an hour, get ahead on the episode, and then you have practice, and then you're staying up late to finish the episode or whatever the case may be. You're just super busy all the time, and we're also still busy because we're trying to grow in the game, but also like being able to chill a little bit and just observe basketball for what it is, not having like the stress around it, getting prepared for a game, but I'm behind on my editing. It's cool. Just, I'll turn on an Alfred game. Shout out to my guys, even though they had pretty rough season, but shout out, like just turning on their games and being able to sit back and relax, observe, see what's similar, see what's different in the game, and be able to really like explore how I want to talk about basketball. I think is another big thing. Just now I'm not a player, I'm not firsthand on the court, but I can see it from a different light now, which has been cool.
It's a very, very elite point by KJ, like finding your voice almost, after like not playing anymore. But to add on to him, like I just love being a fan. Like, for you, I'm still at Utica right now, so I would still go to some of their games, and I'll be at some of their practices. But, the guys on the team would make a joke because I would sit behind the bench, and they would be like, "Oh, that's the unk section now," all the uncles and stuff. Because I would be cheering like an uncle, and I was proud of my boys, and that's kind of what it's been for me this year. Watching Utica, but also watching all the guys that we've interviewed on Not Even D2, just supporting them and watching their journeys. It's been real cool, and it's been cool to view the game in a different way. Like KJ was talking about, just finding your voice within the space, and it's been dope.
Hey, I want to ask, one of the crazy runs we saw was Cuca making a run through the Empire 8. You both played in the Empire 8, so I want to get your perspective on that. They win the conference tournament as the 7 seed, and then gave Trinity Connecticut a pretty good game in that opening round. What was your reaction as former Empire 8 basketball players about Cuca making that run?
Man, it was crazy. Like I was saying, I was at pretty much like every Utica game this year, which meant that I was at most E8 games. And this year in the Empire 8, it was an up and down. Like Sage was number 1, coming into the E8 playoffs, and me personally, I always believed in Utica. Obviously, I'm biased. I'm a biased fan, but I would always believe they would pull it out. But Cuca, they just wanted to run. They had a really great team that was clicking at the right time, and they did their thing against Trinity, and it was cool to see. Even though Utica didn't win, it was cool to see Cuca really do their thing against a NESCAC team. Honestly, because sometimes EA is kind of overlooked, so they definitely put on.
Yeah, for sure. I made a joke in the last episode about Trinity like being in that dogfight. I kind of said, like, if you're in a dogfight against Cuca, then you're not the number 1 team in the country anymore. But I was joking around, but like the Empire, I think I said this on the D3 with Carl on his podcast, just about like the Empire, we might not get that much love, but we know that all the teams, if they get into the tournament, they have a chance to be fit, be like make things weird. Basically, like there's so many good players in the EA, and I could go down a list. Every team has about 1 or 2 guys that can really turn a program around. So it was just cool to see them on that national stage playing the number 1 team in the country. And I was on a flight during the game, and when I got off the flight, I was looking at the score, and they were up by like 15 points. I'm like, what is going on here? But yeah, just showing love to the EA. I follow a lot of those games, and Cuca had a really good year, so shout out to them.
Yeah, I mean, it's been one of those seasons where we've talked about how deep Division III is, and I think that was just an example of, even though you're not a number 1 team or a top 25 team, there's a lot of good players out there and a lot of teams that can give even the best teams a run on the right night. And it was cool to see a team like Cuca get hot and go on that kind of tear through the conference tournament and then give Trinity everything they got. Yeah, that was fun.
Sure. That's what this time of year is all about, right?
It's March.
Right. That's right. It's March, and we got some more coming up here, Matt. Let's get into kind of a review of our picks, and maybe KJ and Ruda have some thoughts on what happened this past weekend.
Yeah, I'll go through each of the games, and then let you guys chime in on anything you found was interesting, Sweet 16 round or throughout the tournament as well. So the first game was Yeshiva at Emory. Yeshiva kept this one close for a little while, but Emory 101-80 winners. That was an 11-point line. So Zach, I got that one last week. Christopher Newport at Randolph-Macon. Christopher Newport pulled off the 59-57 win. This was a big computer line, 16.5 points. That one looked silly by the end. Christopher Newport covered that one. We both got that point. Endicott flew to the Midwest to play Illinois Wesleyan. This was a 4.5-point line, and Illinois Wesleyan did cover that one by 6, 83-77, Zach. So you and I got that one. And then we had a push, WashU and St. Thomas. That was a 2-point computer line, and it ended at exactly 2 points. St. Thomas won. We had both picked WashU, but that one ends up as a push. And then on day 2 of the Sweet 16, Hood and Trinity. This was a big 19-point line, Zach. We thought that was too big. We picked Hood, and it was indeed too big, but only by 2 points. Trinity wins that game by 17. We both got the point there. Tufts and Wesleyan. This was a 1-point line in favor of Wesleyan. Tufts won this game by 14, really flipping the computer line. So I got that point, Zach. You missed it. UW La Crosse and Mary Washington. This was a 9.5-point line in favor of Mary Washington. They did win the game only by 5. So Zach, you get that pick with the UW La Crosse cover. And then Gustavus Adolphus at Chicago. This one was one that Gustavus led for a while and then kind of flipped into Chicago's favor. This was a 4.5-point line though, Zach. So you covered as Chicago only won by 1, and I missed that pick. So overall, last week, Zach, you were 5-2-1. I was also 5-2-1. So it's 51-44-3 on the season, 55-40-3 on the season. So yeah, we'll turn it back over to you guys. Anything that you saw in the Sweet 16 round or whole tournament so far, since this is the first time we're talking to you, that you've been interested in seeing or matchups that you followed, right?
Wait, real quick. I'm curious, who had the advantage in the overall season?
Overall, I'm up by 4 games over Zach. Yeah.
All right, Zach, we got to lock in this week. I'm rooting for you this week.
I'm running out of opportunities, right?
Yeah, I know. We're gonna get hot this week, though.
We got to do it.
To talk about the Sweet 16, I was doing a lot of the NYU women's games, so I couldn't watch the games how I wanted to, but I definitely was trying to follow as much as I could. And what I found interesting was 2 or 3 games were decided by free throws. I believe Randolph-Macon was down 1 in the clutch. Yeah. They missed a free throw. I shouldn't say in the clutch. With 10 seconds left, they missed a free throw. And then in the UW La Crosse versus Mary Washington game, they were also down by 1 with a few seconds to go. They missed. So just how competitive the games have been. We're talking about the spread, and it's a 6-point spread or it's a 4-point spread, and not that that's far off, but just to see that these teams are so evenly balanced. And even a team like Chicago, they're favored by more, but they still down to the wire, losing big in the early part of the game against Gustavus Adolphus. Just shows that the before, I feel like NESCAC and UAA, if they played, for example, the Empire A School, it would be a blowout. But now you're seeing that all these teams from different conferences, from different parts of the world, can really compete against anyone, and it's just showing how Division III is growing as a whole. But that's my initial takeaway. I don't know if Ruda has something to follow.
No, for sure. I think for me, and this happens every year, so it's not like I'm pointing out something that's unique, but just the clashing of styles that you see in the tournament, right? When you have a team like Hood College, which scores the crap out the ball, playing against a great defensive team like Trinity, you want to see what that matchup looks like. And obviously Trinity got the best of them, but I was interested to see what it looks like because they have a guy, Javon, I've been singing his praises last couple of weeks now, Javon Yarbrough, he had 40 in the game before. So I was thinking whoa, he's coming to play, last college game on the line. Obviously, like I said, they lost, but it's for me, that's been cool. The best part about the D3 tournament, seeing these clashes of style, Wash U and St. Thomas. St. Thomas has a really good defense, and Wash U is elite scoring group. So those type of matchups you love, honestly.
The Wash U game was, I don't know if you guys saw any of it, and I didn't love how St. Thomas kind of closed the game, but they were up 12 with 2:30 to go. They were up 10 with a minute to go, and Wash U, it just shows their resilience, especially by Coach Yuckham leading that group. But they were down by 10 with a minute to go, and it was still we're in this game. We think we can win. You could see by how they were playing, how he was coaching, and they got a last shot at the buzzer. And I think Coach Yuckham kind of thought it should have been a foul at the end. He kind of went after the ref after. But either way, they fought really hard. It was a great game. So I think this Elite Eight, we're going to talk about it, but there's some really interesting games. It's going to be a dogfight for sure.
Well, and you mentioned the free throws, KJ, and that's another one. That was another game. Wash U even had that opportunity down 3 because St. Thomas missed a front end, right? And so that could have easily been a 5-point game and just kind of, you just play out the final 10 seconds
exactly.
in total desperation mode. But, that just, you miss that front end. That's like going 0-2 and sets up that opportunity potentially for Wash U.
Yeah, I think St. Thomas, Texas, their last 3 possessions, maybe I got it out of order, but I think it was missed front end of a 1-and-1, next possession turnover, and then the following possession missed the front end of another 1-and-1. So that's why I said I didn't really love how they closed the game, but it's March, things get weird. So I'm definitely looking forward to it.
So we've been enjoying having some guest pickers on. So we'll pick this next slate here, the Elite Eight in Fort Wayne. So we have all neutral site games. We'll go one game by one. Zach, you'll go first. I'll pick second, and then we'll just go because KJ's on top. We'll go KJ, then Ruda, and we'll pick our games. And then if you guys have any interesting things to say about the matchup or team you've seen or whatever, feel free to inject that as you're making your pick. That's always welcome as well. This is
real quick.
Yeah.
I was thinking too. I wanted to add this at the end. I think it's easy to kind of go through the games and pick a game, but I want to have our takes on who we think is going to win the national championship out of this group left. So at the end, let's
do it.
Love to hear that as well. Yeah, that's a great idea. We'll tack that on. We'll each give our pick, our national champions at this point. That'll be fun to see as well. So the first game on our slate here is Christopher Newport in St. Thomas. Our computer sees this as a 1-point game in favor of St. Thomas. Zach, how do you pick against that computer line?
Yeah, super fun matchup because Christopher Newport, no stranger to this point in the tournament, but St. Thomas, a little bit of a newcomer. But I think they've proven enough that they are coming in as a legit threat. So give me St. Thomas as a 1-point favorite here.
Okay, Zach. St. Thomas is a team that I voted higher than Christopher Newport for a lot of the season now, with just this being a 1-point computer line. I think I would predict St. Thomas to win a close game. So if I'm going to pick them to win a close game, I think I'm going to have them covering that 1-point line. So I'm going to go with St. Thomas as well. KJ, how do you pick this one?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you guys. I got St. Thomas. I think it's going to be a really good game. And I was hoping that one of you two pick somebody else because I know Ruda's high on St. Thomas. So that's probably his pick as well. But yeah, St. Thomas is really good. I watched some of their film earlier this morning, and all guys on the floor can make plays. Like they're making tough mid-range shots. They're elite and pick and roll floaters. They play hard. So I think St. Thomas is a really good team. That might be one of the teams I'm thinking about to win the national championship. But that's my pick.
Yeah, I think KJ kind of answered it for me. I'm going with St. Thomas. Shout out Coach Medina, excuse me. Big fan of him. He's a Latino coach in the game, and I love to see other Latino coaches doing well. And obviously, they're doing great this year in the tournament. So I love seeing that type of stuff.
We got to give a shout out to Coach Kokorian too. Christopher Newport's
facts.
Last decade or so, it's just been remarkable. He's shown that he can win in the 90s. He's shown that he can win in the 50s, like last night's performance. So I just wanted to shout him out. They're never out of it. I mean, they lost John Hines, who all-time leading scorer, and they're back in the Elite Eight. So that speaks for itself.
Yeah, he's got a history of having his teams playing their best ball this time of year too. So great coach for sure.
Well, and we'll see if we podcast or jinxed St. Thomas by all four picking them. So we'll have to see that one, how that plays out. The second game on our slate here is Illinois Wesleyan and Emory. Our computer likes Emory by 5 points. Zach, your pick.
I'll take the 5 points with Illinois Wesleyan. I'm not positive they're going to pull off the upset, but they're going to keep that like a 1-possession game. Noah Cleveland looks great despite wearing the cast, right? He's back and looking good. That's going to be a problem for Emory. I think Illinois Wesleyan, not the biggest backcourt, right? So they're going to have to figure out how to deal with that strong, powerful backcourt of Ben Pierce and Jair Knight, but they play really great team defense. This is definitely a game that Illinois Wesleyan can win. So give me 5 points.
Yeah, Zach, I would definitely pick Emory to win this game right now. They're just a team I've been voting higher on the neutral court here. But for 5 points, Emory handled Yeshiva pretty well last weekend. But I think Illinois Wesleyan maybe will present another step up and challenge here. So I'm going to go with the Titans as well. I'm going to go same direction as you. Maybe Emory to win this game, but in a close 1-possession or so game that Illinois Wesleyan can keep close. How about you, KJ?
Yeah. All right, Bob Cloman, don't kill me on this one, but I'm rolling with Emory minus the 5 points. I think Emory has the most uniqueness left in the tournament. They're one of the few teams that are playing majority zone. They're one of the few teams that are still running with it'll be in crunch time, and they're still getting up and down at an elite pace. That's their style. So that's the uniqueness in their team, and I think, like you said, Ben Pierce and Jair Knight are so good. And I've been saying this all year. I think they're one of the best duos in the country. I think Jair or Ben, my apologies. Ben is the best point guard in the country. So I think they'll roll against Illinois Wesleyan. But like you said, Illinois Wesleyan, Coach Rose have been doing a really good job this year. So I think it would be a good game, but Emory minus 5, I'm taking.
Yeah, I also have to give an apology to Bob because we did a whole Endicott episode and it was showing a lot of Endicott love. I know
Yeah.
Bob is not happy about that, but I'm rolling with Emory, but I'm gonna go +5. I think just in terms of +5 for Illinois Wesleyan because I think it's gonna be a close game. Um, just because Illinois, like Noah Cleveland is raw, like he's legit. Just watching him play, and he was such a Elijah Kinney, like he's good, and Marcus they're good, but like he was giving he was giving them problems all game like, against Endicott. So I think it's going to be an interesting matchup, just a clash of styles a little bit.
All right, so our third game here is a NESCAC battle. Tufts are Trinity is 7.5-point favorites against Tufts here on the neutral court once again. Zach, how do you pick this one?
I'm going to go with Tufts because that's a fairly big number considering how well Tufts is playing to get to this point. So I will take the 7.5. I had some concerns coming into the tournament, injury situation with Scott Gemesi, but they have proven so far in their tournament run that even if he's in a reduced capacity, they still have what it takes. That they can definitely keep this within a possession or two with Trinity.
Yeah, Zach, I'm going to pick Tufts as well with the 7.5-point line. I looked down at halftime, their score. They had doubled up Wesleyan at that point. They were up big. I think it was 44-22 at that time. They didn't win by quite that margin, but they still held off Wesleyan pretty well. I think Tufts is playing really strong right now. I don't know, maybe Trinity wins. Maybe I'd still favor Trinity to win this game, but 7.5 points. Two teams that have seen each other, although this will only be, I think, the second time they've played each other this season. But they definitely know, those programs know each other. So I think it's going to be closer than 7.5. Whether or not Trinity wins, I don't exactly know, but I'm going to roll with Tufts against this computer line.
Yeah. This is probably the game of the weekend, or game of the weekend, I should say. NESCAC's playing against each other in the Elite Eight. You can't ask for much more. Two of the best teams in the country. I think game one, Tufts won by about 6 points. And same type of thing. Wesleyan beat Trinity in the regular season, and then we saw what happened in the conference championship. So Coach Cosgrove already has shown that on game two he's making the needed adjustments, or his team is as a whole. But I really think that Coach Linton and Tufts, they showed me something last round, beating Wesleyan, how they controlled that game and dominated. So I think I'll take Tufts plus the points, and I'm taking Tufts to outright round.
Okay.
I'll take.
Okay. Like it.
I like that pick a lot. It's honestly hard for me to go against Trinity right now, just because like they are national champion. Like they've been here before. They know. We had Henry Vetter on the pod, and he talked a lot about how, like, even though they made it to that Final Four the year before, like that prepared them so much for the next year where they have won the national championship, where they felt ready for the moment. So I would say I'm going with Trinity, but I think it's going to cover. I think it's going to be a close game, just because Josh Bernstein, Scott Gemesi, like they're really good players over there. Coach Linton, like it's been awesome to watch his run, because I know he was, he talked about on the pod last year with us how he felt like he could have coached a better game against Redlands, and now got them in the Elite Eight. It's dope to see.
A third year in a row for Trinity playing at Fort Wayne. So it's a neutral court game, but maybe they're going to feel a little home court advantage in a place that a lot of those guys have been there for 3 years, right? So will be interesting for them. All right, Zach, our fourth game of the Elite Eight round, Chicago versus Mary Washington. Our computer likes Mary Washington by 2.5 points. This is one of the matchups I'm most excited about. I love all these matchups, but I'm really, really excited for this matchup. But Zach, how do you pick against this line?
I'm going to go Mary Washington. I know KJ wanted to talk national champions at the end. And, when I filled out my bracket, I had Mary Washington. So I gotta stick with them. It's only 2.5 point line here. So I'll lay those points, and I'll just roll right into, KJ's discussion here. I got Mary Washington win it all. They were, like I said, when I filled out my bracket, they were my pick. They're still here. I don't have any reason to change. A team I've really liked going all the way back, Matt. We saw them in person at the Great Lakes Invitational, and, they've, like Kai Robinson, he's just a sophomore, but man, they've got some young players that you would never know are young players. They play with a really, they just have a really mature approach to the game. You can't speed them up. One of those teams that you can trust to kind of do the right thing all the time. They're not going to hurt themselves. So if shots are falling, they're going to be tough to beat. Give me Mary Washington minus the 2.5, and I'm sticking with them to win it all.
Okay.
Heard.
All right, Zach, I went back and forth on this a ton. I ended up going with Chicago plus the 2.5 points. I'm going to go opposite of you here, but this is going to be a great game. I think I have these two teams almost even. So it's going to be, I mean, one possession either way. That's why I like Chicago, because 2.5 points feels like it's a little bit too big. I like 1 or 2 points by either team either way. I don't know if I'm quite ready to make my national championship pick, so I'm going to let everyone else make their picks. I'm going to still think about who I like here, and I'll give mine at the end.
You want to see who makes the best argument so that you can copy that pick.
I guess so.
That's what
Yeah.
you're looking to do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you notice how he goes second in this contest, and he's the one that has the lead, right?
I can change my pick no matter what. Yeah.
No, that's funny. I think I'm gonna copy Matt too and wait to pick my national championship till the end. Maybe hear what Zach and Ruda think before I give mine. But yeah, I think this matchup is also right up there for game of the week. And I think one thing that has to be talked about is Shane Regan's got to get more credit for his impact on winning. Like, to go from Wesleyan, bring them to the Final Four, and now to bring you Chicago to the Elite Eight with a chance to get right back to the Final Four. That's got to be talked about a little bit more. I know he didn't win UAA Player of the Year, but I thought he had a strong case. So shout out to him. And I think it really comes down to this game, who's better, him or Kyle Robinson. I mean, what Kyle had last night, 35 and 11 rebounds. So he's playing point guard with 11 rebounds. He plays hard. He hit some big shots last night. I'm really looking forward to see that little guard-to-guard matchup. And for my pick, I think I got to go with the veteran group in Chicago. I mean, Nick Roper and Shane Regan leading the helm as grad students. And like you said, like Mary Washington, they play like they're a mature group, but they're still young at the end of the day, for better or for worse. But I'm just going to trust that the people that have been here before will be more composed, and that's going to bring me to my decision. Chicago plus 2.5.
I'm gonna have to roll my boy KJ. Use Chicago plus 2.5. I just feel like, like KJ said, obviously they have, players that have been here before that are great winning players, but that Gustavus Adolphus, am I saying that right? Gustavus Adolphus.
Yes,
that game showed me a lot. They got a lot of resilience. Because they was down early in that game. They came back, and they've kind of been in different situations. Like, they beat a team by 20 early on in the tournament. So they've been in every type of situation. So I got to roll with you, Chicago, for this one, plus 2.5. So.
All right. Well, you guys bought me a few extra minutes to think about my national champion. I've been voting Trinity, Connecticut #1 almost all season long, so I feel like I almost have to pick them. But Emory's really, really good too, so I feel like I'm going back and forth between those two picks. We do have 8 teams. I wouldn't be completely shocked any of these 8 teams finish in any order, but I guess I have to make one pick. So today, just based how I'm feeling, vibes only, I'm picking Emory right now. Even though I picked Illinois Wesleyan against the spread here, I think I'm picking Emory to win the national championship today.
I respect it. That's always a good pick. I have some thoughts about Emory. I'll say in a little bit, but I want Ruda to give his. That would be my deciding factor.
I'm rolling with Matt. I got Emory too. Jair Knight, Ben Pierce, both great players. And I just think they're a great program. And they're all these teams in the tournaments are great programs. But I'm really rolling with Emory.
Yeah, I like that, bro. I was leaning towards Emory before the call, to be honest. But the more I think about it, like that pace that they play with, and it's been working for them all season, so maybe I don't have the right to say this, but I just think eventually in the tournament, things have to be a little bit more, and not that Coach Zimmerman doesn't have it structured. They play fast, but they're super structured. But I just think late in the season, you got to have some sort of elite half-court offense. I'm not sure if Emory has that quite yet. So I'm not going to say Emory, and this is also a hot take, and I'm just going to keep rolling with Chicago. I mean, I was really impressed with what they did at NYU when I watched them play. They can all shoot. Shane Regan, like I said, he's one of the better players in Division III. Their veteran group, I forgot their coach's name, but he's been there for so long, and it's his opportunity to get on that stage. So my pick is a hot take too, but I got Chicago.
Yeah, Coach McGrath down there at Chicago. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Good shout.
All right. Well, great to have you on for the picks. Do you guys have anything exciting coming up on podcast that you're willing to share? Any episodes that you're working on or things like that?
Well, and just give a plug. How can
make sure we
connect with you and make sure they're checking out your stuff?
Yeah, for sure. So go catch us at Not Even D2. That's our name. We have that everywhere on Instagram. We have an X account. We don't really use it as much anymore. X, YouTube, subscribe over there. We got a lot of short film and long film content out on all platforms. So go check that out. In terms of plans, we have something in store for the summer. I'm not gonna quite say, but definitely have big plans for the summer. Coming next, we are in the works of getting the Scranton and NYU women's basketball head coaches on. We haven't confirmed that 100%, but that's going to be a crazy game. Both teams undefeated. Both teams, Scranton just beat Pitt this year, and NYU don't have to say much more. They just broke all kinds of records throughout the year. So we're working on that. And then for the national championship, we also have something in store. We haven't 100% confirmed on the men's side, but we'll definitely plot more together. I don't know if Ruda has extra thoughts surrounding it.
Yeah, like KJ said, to help us or support us, YouTube, Instagram, those are probably the two biggest platforms that we use. KJ puts a lot of time into the YouTube, and I put a lot of time into the Instagram. That's how we kind of get the content out. In terms of, plans, like one thing that we've been doing recently that I feel like people should really check out is film breakdowns with the players. We've been doing that last couple of weeks, and I think it's getting a lot of traction on the socials, which is cool to see. And I think every time we do that with the player, they're like, "Oh, we're talking about our film." Like they enjoy that side of it, so that's been cool. But yeah, am I missing anything else, Kay?
No? Yeah, one more thing. We got merchandise too. So if anyone wants some D2 merch, feel free to contact Ruda or I. We got that going. It's been doing good so far. So hit us for that.
Awesome stuff, guys. Keep up the good work.
Yeah.
I love tuning in. You guys are doing awesome stuff. Doing it your own way, your own style. I think it's awesome to see. Keep up the good work. And, it's been fun to see you guys keep growing and the kind of guests that you've been getting on. I'm going to plug, you guys had Duncan Robinson on. That was a big time one kind of at the start of the basketball season, which was extra cool for us being in Michigan and having him coming over to the Pistons. So Ruda, I know you're a Knicks fan. So, the Pistons, every time the Knicks come up, they've been sending them back to the kids table. So I got to say sorry about that. But hey, man, maybe there'll be another playoff series for those two.
Look, honestly, KJ asked me this question earlier in the year. He said, "Yo, Ruda, who you root for when you watch, Duncan play or watch the Pistons play?" I said, "Bro, I wear my Knicks shorts and my Pistons shirt." So I'm a fan of both. Honestly, I love seeing Duncan doing well, but I also love seeing my Knicks do well. But it's gonna hurt my heart if they play each other. I'm not gonna lie.
Real quick, just so everyone on this knows that Oklahoma City is still the best team in the NBA. So yeah, it's cool to talk about the Knicks and the Pistons, but there's still another level to get to. But real quick, just shout out to you guys too. I don't know if you guys get enough credit for the work you do with MPI, the computer projections. I know that was something big in our locker room when I was a part of it last year. So shout out to you guys, all the players around the country really appreciate it. And I know Ruda and I do as well.
Well, and we're all trying to do the same thing, right? Shine a spotlight on Division III or other small college type players who deserve, a ton of credit for what they're doing. So we love it. We love the level following D3 basketball. And I know you guys as former players and have turned this into a podcast as well, feel the same way about D3.
For sure. Appreciate you guys having us.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
All right. A lot of fun to do the picks every week. Even more fun to do the picks with KJ and Ruda. Check out their stuff. They do a great job with the Not Even D2 podcast. But Matt, we got some packing to do, but before we do that, let's get this show wrapped up. We got one thing in the mailbag here. Comes from Teddy Ball Game on X. Can you guys explain the history behind Fort Wayne as the usual Final Four destination? Matt, and I think it's a little bit interesting to hear Fort Wayne referred to at this point as the usual Final Four destination, because a lot of years that was Salem, Virginia. But this will be the sixth and final year that Fort Wayne serves host for the Final Four. And that's just because, there was a point in time where that was put up for bid. And I believe Salem, Virginia was involved in that bid, but it was won by Fort Wayne. And so they took over as the hosts. There was the year that was interrupted by COVID that kind of extended it into this being the final year. But this is the last year of Fort Wayne serving as a host, and we move on to Pittsburgh being that destination for the next 2 years.
Yeah, the NCAA championships revolve around a bid cycle. So an organization or location will bid for the championships. They'll give a facility. They'll talk about what hotels they have available, things like that. And then the bid will be awarded. And it's been in Fort Wayne. Was it, I think, 2 bid cycles, or was it one long bid that they won? I don't know the
Yeah,
exact thing. It
I
probably
was
has to be
trying to
2 bid
remember.
cycles.
Yeah, I was trying to remember if they awarded it as a 6-year cycle or if there was,
Yeah.
kind of an initial award and then an extension. I don't recall specifically how that played out, but
But then this past, I think was it fall maybe, that it was announced that Pittsburgh would be the next location. So Pittsburgh will take over next year. I think that's at Duquesne University, if that's correct there. And then that bid cycle though is only I should know
2
the
years.
answer here, 2 years. But I think the following bid will be awarded next year or before we've actually seen Pittsburgh, right?
I think the timing, yeah. I think it was a 2-year bid cycle because they're kind of standardizing or bringing multiple championships or the whole division into kind of the same cycle, um, as opposed to it, like,
Yeah.
oh, it's time to rebid this sport, but not this sport. So I think that has something to do with it.
And I think we heard that maybe Fort Wayne, I don't know how hard they chased additional bids or if they were looking for D2 or D1 or D1 women or other type of opportunities as well in Fort Wayne. So maybe that they were going to end their time as Division III bids. Well, we'll see if they do it in the future. I think there's a lot of people excited for Pittsburgh as well next year. We'll have to see how that goes. I just know geographically, Pittsburgh is a really good location as kind of like a central point in Division III geography. If you just think about like 500 miles, you can go a lot of different directions. You can get to like Chicago, but you can also get to like, past New York City and deep into Virginia and things like that within 500 miles. So you can get a lot of these teams. A lot of these teams that are coming this weekend would be within 500 miles of a Pittsburgh as well.
I know Salem, Virginia did a great job for a number of years. Not the easiest place to get into, with a small airport there, but and not centrally located. I really like seeing it somewhere between kind of Western Pennsylvania, Central Indiana, kind of along that corridor there. You can go east, you can go west, you can go a little bit north, but south, and you're really kind of in the central part of the main D3 footprint. Kind
I
of
think
between kind of like basically Fort Wayne and Pittsburgh. Anything in between, I think, is a great location
I think
to be
Salem is
somewhat centrally
hosting
located.
the women's basketball championships this year. I think are in Salem. They've hosted a
At
lot
Roanoke,
of
yeah.
football championships in that region as well. I think that as hosts of Division III, that they've done a really good job. They've been highly regarded as hosts. So I think there's every chance that a men's basketball championship cycle could end back up in Salem, Virginia as well in the future. We'll have to see if Fort Wayne, I know selfishly, Zach, is really convenient for us to drive to Fort Wayne, Indiana from Michigan. So we like that part of it. But mostly we just like Division III being highlighted. So whoever does a good job with Division III, I think we'd be happy for them to host.
Mm-hmm. And Fort Wayne has done a great job too. We've noticed kind of each year we go, there's a new little touch or something that they do in the arena. Like there's some great championship banners celebrating kind of the Fort Wayne era that showed up last year. And I imagine they'll do something extra special this year to kind of cap off that Fort Wayne era. They've done a great job, and I don't believe they were part of the last bid cycle. I think they, like you said, they think they kind of wanted to get their foot in the door with this and then pursue some other things, maybe at the Division II or Division I level. But they really, I think, did a good job, and it'd be great to see them maybe getting involved in future bid cycles.
Yeah.
All right, that wraps up the mailbag, Matt. Let's go get packing. Let's give a good job team to our Patreon supporters at patreon.com/D3 Datacast. Special shout outs new this week, Scott and Jacob Roden. Great to have you on board, joining the rest of this great group who support our efforts, putting on this show, keeping D3Datacast.com available for everyone to see all the information there, ad-free experience, and couldn't be more grateful to have their ongoing support.
Very best of luck to everyone headed to Fort Wayne. If you're headed there associated with one of those schools or just as a general fan, feel free to say hi to us. We'll be down at the media table covering these games. So in between games or before, wave at us, say, hey, Zach, hey, Matt. Data guys sometimes say, hey, you're the guys from Twitter. We've heard all of it. Say hi to us if you see us around town or at the arena. It's always a fun part of Division III is we see a lot of fans, coaches, and other people that love the level like we do also watching these games. We get to meet people for the first time or see people kind of once a year in that kind of aspect. We really love that. Thanks to everyone who supports us on Patreon. It allows us to do these shows. It allows us to host the data on our website, D3Datacast.com. So if you'd like to join it, either the $3 or $5 a month level, go to patreon.com/D3Datacast. But now, Zach, as you said, we got to jump in the car. We got to pack. We got to drive to Fort Wayne. Good job, team.